Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking into something that sounds like it's straight out of like a tall tale.
Oh, yeah.
The Boston Molasses Flood of 1919.
Wow.
You sent over a podcast episode and some really fascinating historical analysis.
Oh, I had a lot of fun with this one.
And I got to admit, I was surprised by just how much there is to this story.
Absolutely.
Like, it's more than just a funny headline.
Yeah, it really is fascinating how this seemingly kind of funny event, can open up a window into a really complex time in American history.
Yeah, and like all these different threads. You have war and prohibition and immigration and industrialization.
And it all comes together.
Yeah. So maybe a good place to start would be just setting the scene.
Okay.
So it's 1919 and we're in Boston's North End.
Right.
Can you paint a picture of what life was like there?
So the North End at the time was it was a really bustling neighborhood, very densely populated,
Okay.
narrow streets,
Yeah.
just packed with people from all sorts of backgrounds.
A real melting pot.
A real melting pot,
Yeah.
and really vibrant. But the sources you provided really paint this picture of stark poverty there too.
Yeah.
Especially, in contrast to other wealthier parts of Boston.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so you can imagine, families crammed into these tiny basement rooms,
Wow.
barely able to stand upright.
And right in the middle of all of this is this massive metal tank, 50 feet tall and 90 feet across, just looming over this neighborhood.
Right.
What was it even doing there? Like, I wouldn't think that a neighborhood like that would be a hub for large-scale industry.
Well, so molasses, it was a key ingredient in producing ethanol, which was in high demand because of the war effort.
Okay.
They needed ethanol for all sorts of things, including, munitions manufacturing for World War I.
Wow, I never would have guessed that molasses was tied to munitions production.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of it like baking.
Right? Baking and rum.
Yeah.
It's got a long history in Boston.
So was this common to use molasses this way at the time, or is this something that was kind of spurred by World War I?
Molasses has a really long history in Boston, all the way back to like the days of rum production.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, during the war, its role shifted dramatically,
Okay.
with this demand for industrial ethanol really skyrocketing.
So this giant tank wasn't just like a neighborhood curiosity.
Oh,
It was actually playing like a strategic role in the war effort.
absolutely.
Wow.
And this is where things start to get a little bit unsettling.
Okay.
From the very beginning, there were signs that this tank, which was built in 1915, was a disaster waiting to happen.
Oh, no.
It groaned under the weight of the molasses and it leaked constantly,
Really?
made all sorts of unsettling noises.
You mentioned leaks.
Yeah.
Your own mother used to collect leaking molasses from this tank to use for baking.
It's almost unbelievable now, considering what happened.
Yeah.
But at the time, I don't think anyone really grasped the true danger.
It seems like the company wasn't too concerned about the leaks either.
What were they doing to address the problem?
Well, their solution was incredibly short-sighted.
What did they do?
Instead of properly repairing the tank,
Yeah.
they just slapped on a fresh coat of brown paint to hide the leaks.
Oh, wow.
Kind of a chilling example of prioritizing appearances over safety.
So they were cutting corners.
Definitely cutting corners.
But if they were supplying ethanol for the war effort, wouldn't there have been some kind of oversight or safety regulations?
You would think so.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that really wasn't the case back then.
Yeah.
Safety regulations were practically non-existent.
Wow.
It seems that the company was willing to take risks, especially with wartime demand to meet.
So you have this enormous tank filled with this volatile substance, shoddy construction, just waiting for something to go wrong.
A recipe for disaster.
And then on January 15th, 1919, it did
Right.
what happened.
So picture this.
Okay.
A surprisingly warm day for January in Boston.
Okay.
That warmth thinned the molasses.
Oh, wow. So it made it less viscous. Exactly.
Okay.
More prone to sudden movement.
In it.
With a deafening roar.
Oh my gosh.
The tank bursts.
Wow, what was the immediate aftermath like? The sources describe this 15 to 20-foot wave of molasses moving faster than a person can run.
Yeah, it was absolute chaos.
Oh, my God.
Buildings were crushed.
Wow.
People and horses were swept away in the sticky tide, and firefighters responding to the scene found themselves trapped.
Oh, well.
It was a total sensory nightmare.
Yeah, I was reading about some incredible stories of survival
Oh, yeah.
amidst the chaos.
Yeah.
Like Martin Clordy,
Right.
a bartender who used his bed as a raft to save himself and his sister.
Wow.
But sadly, he lost his mother in the flood.
It's so sad.
And then there's Anthony DeStasio,
Oh, yeah.
a young boy who was pulled from a makeshift morgue.
Oh my gosh.
initially thought to be dead.
Anthony's story is particularly harrowing.
Yeah, what happened?
He had been choked unconscious by the molasses.
Wow.
His nose and throat were filled with the thick liquid,
Oh my gosh.
and making it almost impossible to breathe.
Oh wow.
It's a miracle he survived.
It's incredible that anyone managed to survive such a sudden and powerful event.
Right.
It really speaks to the resilience of the human spirit
For sure.
in the face of unimaginable circumstances.
Yeah.
We also have Frank McManus, the policeman, who thankfully had the presence of mind to immediately call for help.
Absolutely.
His quick thinking undoubtedly saved lives.
Yeah.
The aftermath was devastating, though, right?
It was.
The sources say 21 people died
Right.
and another 150 were injured.
And that's just the immediate human cost.
Right.
You know, the destruction to the neighborhood itself was widespread.
Yeah.
Buildings damaged beyond repair, and the cleanup effort was just a logistical nightmare.
Yeah. You can imagine.
Yeah. It took weeks to clear the streets of this thick, sticky molasses.
It's hard to imagine the scale of the devastation.
It really is.
But amidst the tragedy, there were also stories of incredible courage and selflessness.
Oh, absolutely.
What can you tell us about the response to the disaster?
Well, it was truly remarkable.
Yeah.
Navy cadets from a nearby training ship rushed to the scene to help.
Oh, wow.
And everyday citizens joined in, digging through the wreckage and doing whatever they could to assist.
It's amazing how people come together
Yeah.
in those times of crisis.
It really is a testament to the human capacity for compassion, even in the face of such horror.
Yeah, but once the immediate crisis passed,
Right.
attention inevitably turned to the question of who was responsible for this disaster.
Of course.
And it seems the company at fault, U.S. Industrial Alcohol, had a particular strategy for deflecting blame.
Yes, they did.
Dude, what was it?
They decided to point the finger at a convenient scapegoat anarchists.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So at the time, there was a lot of fear and anxiety surrounding the anarchist movement.
There was?
Was this a common tactic for companies or powerful institutions to blame anarchists for incidents like this?
Well, blaming anarchists was a way to really tap into existing fears and prejudices and to distract from their own failings.
Right.
It was a tactic that could be quite effective in swaying public opinion.
The sources mention a specific anarchist figure,
Yeah.
Luigi Galliani,
Right.
who was leading a bombing campaign at the time.
He was.
What can you tell us about him and his group? So, to be clear, Galliani and his followers were known for actual acts of violence, not just theoretical anarchism.
Exactly. They targeted symbols of authority and wealth,
Okay.
with bombings aimed at, police stations, courthouses, even the homes of prominent figures.
Yeah.
It's important to acknowledge that, their actions created genuine fear and disruption.
Yeah, the source material mentions flyers with threats like, "We will dynamite you," being distributed in the North End just days before the flood.
Yeah, it's creepy.
That's pretty unnerving considering what happened.
Yeah.
Did the company offer any evidence to link Galliani to the molasses tank disaster, or was this just a case of exploiting a climate of fear?
There was never any evidence to connect Galliani's group to the molasses tank. The company's claims were based entirely on speculation and the timing of those threats.
Right.
So it seems that their strategy was to capitalize on public anxiety, hoping to deflect attention from their own responsibility.
It makes you wonder, how much did pre-existing biases against immigrants play into the company's strategy? I mean, the North End was a predominantly Italian immigrant community,
Right.
and Galliani himself was an Italian anarchist.
Yeah.
Was there a tendency to lump all Italian immigrants together with this radical fringe?
Absolutely. There was a significant amount of anti-immigrant sentiment in the U.S. at the time, particularly directed at Italians and other Southern European groups.
Right.
It's important to remember that the anarchist movement, while real, represented a tiny fraction of the immigrant population.
Right.
But it was easy for the company to exploit those existing prejudices
Yeah.
and, paint this picture of a dangerous subversive element lurking within the community.
So did people buy into the company's narrative?
It's hard to say for sure how effective the company's strategy was in shaping public opinion, but it certainly muddied the waters and created confusion around the cause of the disaster.
Thankfully, the victims had a powerful advocate in their corner, Damon Hall, their lawyer.
Yes, they did.
How did he approach the case?
Well, Damon Hall was a brilliant lawyer who saw right through the company's attempts to deflect blame.
Okay.
He focused on what he could prove the company's negligence.
Smart.
He gathered evidence of the faulty construction, the ignored warnings, and the blatant disregard for safety.
Wow.
His goal was to demonstrate that the disaster was not some random act of sabotage,
Right.
but a direct result of the company's reckless actions.
So this must have been a monumental legal battle.
It was.
What were some of the challenges that Damon Hall faced in proving the company's culpability?
Well, it was a real David versus Goliath scenario.
Yeah.
U.S. Industrial Alcohol was a powerful corporation with deep pockets
Of course.
and a team of lawyers ready to fight tooth and nail.
Yep.
They tried every trick in the book to delay the proceedings, discredit witnesses, and downplay their own responsibility.
Wow.
But Damon Hall persisted, meticulously building his case and refusing to be intimidated.
That's awesome.
It took 5 years.
5 years.
To reach a verdict.
A long time.
That's a long time to fight for justice.
It is.
What was the outcome of the trial?
Well, in the end, justice prevailed.
That's great.
The court ruled in favor of the victims, finding U.S. Industrial Alcohol fully responsible for the disaster.
Wow.
And the judge really didn't mince words, stating that the company's negligence was the direct and proximate cause of the flood.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a landmark decision holding a powerful corporation accountable for its actions and setting a precedent for future cases involving corporate negligence.
That's a really powerful outcome.
It is.
What was the financial impact of the ruling?
Right.
Did the company have to compensate the victims and their families? They did. The court ordered U.S. Industrial Alcohol to pay out a staggering $628,000 in damages.
Wow.
Which would be millions of dollars in today's money.
Yeah, that's incredible.
This was a huge victory for the victims and their families who had endured so much suffering and loss.
Absolutely.
And it also sent a clear message to other corporations that ignoring safety precautions comes with a hefty price.
That's an incredible sum for the time.
It is.
It seems like this wasn't just a personal victory for the victims and their families,
No,
but a victory for public safety in general.
it was.
Did the disaster and subsequent legal battle lead to any lasting changes in terms of regulations and oversight?
Absolutely. The molasses flood really served as a wake-up call, exposing the inadequacy of existing safety standards and the dangers of unchecked corporate power.
It's crazy to think that something that terrible had to happen for things to change.
It is, but the case spurred significant reforms in Boston's building codes,
Oh, wow.
particularly in the construction and maintenance of large storage tanks. These new regulations mandated stricter inspections, stronger materials, and greater accountability for companies handling potentially hazardous materials.
So it sounds like it had a big impact.
A big impact.
It's heartbreaking that such a tragedy was necessary to prompt these changes.
It is.
But it's reassuring to know that some good came out of it, even if it was at such a terrible cost.
It's always nice when there's a silver lining.
Yeah. So we've talked about the immediate aftermath, the legal battle, and the regulatory changes that followed.
Right.
But what about the broader impact?
Yeah.
How did the Boston Molasses flood shape the city's identity and the way people viewed industrial progress and corporate responsibility?
Well, the molasses flood left an indelible mark on Boston's collective memory.
I bet.
It became this cautionary tale, a reminder of the potential for disaster when industrial growth outpaces safety considerations.
Makes sense.
It also forced people to grapple with, the complex relationship between corporations, government, and the communities they impact.
So the story seems to resonate on multiple levels.
It does.
It's about the human cost of corporate negligence.
Yes.
But also about these broader social issues like immigration
Yes.
and the struggle for worker safety.
Exactly. Well, the flood itself was this sudden, dramatic event.
Right.
Its roots were tangled up in these long-standing social and economic inequalities.
I see.
The North End, with its dense population of immigrant workers, was particularly vulnerable to the risks posed by unchecked industrial development.
Do you think the company would have been as quick to blame anarchists if the disaster had happened in a wealthier, more politically connected neighborhood?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
It's hard to say for sure, but
Yeah.
it does raise these important points about power dynamics and whose voices get heard when tragedies occur.
Absolutely.
The North End at the time was a community that lacked political clout and often faced discrimination.
Yeah.
It's possible that the company saw an opportunity to exploit those vulnerabilities and shift blame away from themselves.
And if you think about the stories we choose to tell about disasters
Yeah.
and whose perspectives get prioritized.
Right.
The molasses flood with its bizarre imagery could easily be dismissed as a freak accident,
Right.
a strange footnote in history.
Yeah.
But when you dig deeper,
Yeah.
you see the human stories, The systemic failures and the lasting consequences that extend far beyond the immediate event.
Absolutely. It's crucial to, move beyond the spectacle and engage with the complexities.
Okay.
The Boston Molasses flood wasn't just about a faulty tank.
Yeah.
It was about this convergence of social, economic, and political forces that created the conditions for disaster.
I think it's also a story that resonates today.
Oh, yeah.
In a time when we're grappling with, new technological advancements and their potential risks.
Right.
Are there parallels between the molasses flood and modern concerns about corporate responsibility,
Yeah.
environmental damage, and the potential for unforeseen consequences?
Oh, the parallels are striking.
Yeah, like what?
I mean, we see echoes of the molasses flood in incidents like the Bhopal gas tragedy,
Right.
the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and countless other disasters where industrial processes have gone awry, causing widespread harm to human health and the environment.
So it seems like despite advancements in technology and regulations,
Right.
we're still struggling with some of the same fundamental issues,
We are.
like corporate greed,
Yeah.
inadequate oversight,
Uh-huh.
and the prioritization of profit over safety.
It's a tale as old as time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is.
So what does all this mean for someone listening to this deep dive today? What are some tangible takeaways from the Boston Molasses flood that they can apply to their own lives and thinking?
I think the most important takeaway is the importance of questioning assumptions
Okay.
and not taking things at face value.
Okay.
Whether it's a news story, a company's claims, or even our own understanding of how things work,
Yeah.
it's crucial to dig deeper, to ask why and how, and to be willing to challenge the status quo.
And to remember that history isn't just a collection of dates and facts.
No, it's not.
It's full of these cautionary tales.
Yeah.
These reminders that progress isn't always linear.
Right.
And that the pursuit of profit often comes at a cost.
Absolutely. The molasses flood might seem like this bizarre, isolated event,
Right.
but it's really a microcosm of so many of the challenges we still face today.
Oh, yeah.
It's a story about power, responsibility, and the consequences of our choices,
Yeah.
both individually and collectively.
So as we move towards wrapping up our deep dive into the Boston Molasses flood, what are some key insights or questions you'd want our listener to ponder?
I think the molasses flood, for all its strangeness, is a story that really demands reflection. It asks us to consider the hidden costs of progress, the fragility of our infrastructure, and the importance of holding those in power accountable for their actions.
And it challenges us to think critically about the narratives we construct around disasters,
Absolutely.
ensuring that the voices of the victims are heard and that lessons are learned.
Precisely. The molasses flood is not just a historical curiosity.
Right. It's a cautionary tale that remains relevant in today's world.
It's easy to look back at an event like this and think, well, then things are different now. But are they really?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Have we truly learned from the mistakes of the past?
Right, because it's easy to point fingers at a company from a century ago and say they should have known better.
Right.
But what about the companies operating today?
Exactly.
Are we holding them to a high enough standard?
Right. Are we asking the right questions about the risks involved in their operations?
And it's not just about these massive industrial accidents.
No.
It's about that mindset of prioritizing profit over safety cutting corners, assuming that it won't happen to us.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, we see it in all sorts of industries.
Yeah, even in seemingly mundane things.
It's about a culture that often downplays or ignores warning signs.
Yeah.
Whether it's a worker reporting a safety concern or a community raising concerns about environmental impact.
The molasses flood is a stark reminder that even seemingly small oversights can have catastrophic consequences.
For sure.
So to our listener,
Yeah.
we encourage you to keep exploring the source material that you provided
Have fun with it.
and to keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
Yes.
What other seemingly minor events in history might hold hidden depths?
That's a great question.
What stories are waiting to be unearthed?
Yeah.
And what lessons can they teach us?
The past is full of wisdom waiting to be discovered if we're willing to look for it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deeper. It's easy to look back at an event like this and think, well, then things are different now, but are they really? Are we any better at anticipating and preventing these kinds of disasters, especially as technologies become more complex and potentially more dangerous?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Have we truly learned from the mistakes of the past?
Yeah, because it's easy to point fingers at a company from a century ago and say they should have known better.
Right.
But what about the companies operating today?
Exactly.
Are we holding them to a high enough standard? Are we asking the right questions about the risks involved in their operations?
I think those are questions we should all be asking ourselves as citizens, as consumers.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to hold these companies accountable.
And it's not just about these massive industrial accidents.
Yeah.
It's about that mindset, right?
Right.
Prioritizing profit over safety cutting corners, assuming that it won't happen to us.
It's everywhere you look.
We see it in all sorts of industries.
Yeah, even in seemingly mundane things.
Like it's about a culture that often downplays or ignores warning signs.
Right.
Whether it's a worker, reporting a safety concern or a community raising concerns about environmental impact.
Absolutely.
The molasses flood is a stark reminder that even seemingly small oversights can have catastrophic consequences.
I mean, just think about it. A little leak here, little crack there.
Right.
And suddenly you have this massive wave of molasses engulfing an entire neighborhood.
So what does all this mean for someone listening to this deep dive today? What are some tangible takeaways from the Boston Molasses flood that they could apply to their own lives and thinking?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is the importance of questioning assumptions, not taking things at face value.
Yeah.
Whether it's a news story, a company's claims, or even our own understanding of how things work.
Right.
It's crucial to dig deeper, to ask why and how, and to be willing to challenge the status quo.
And to remember that history isn't just a collection of dates and facts.
No, it's not.
It's full of these cautionary tales.
Right.
These reminders that progress isn't always linear and that the pursuit of profit often comes at a cost.
Absolutely. The molasses flood might seem like this bizarre, isolated event,
Right.
but it's really a microcosm of so many of the challenges we still face today.
Wow.
It's a story about power, responsibility, and the consequences of our choices, both individually and collectively.
Well, I think we've given our listener a lot to think about today.
I hope so.
What would you say is the most enduring legacy of the Boston Molasses flood?
For me, the most enduring legacy is the resilience of the North End community.
Yeah.
Despite the immense tragedy and loss, they rebuilt their lives in their neighborhood.
It's amazing.
It's truly inspiring.
Yeah.
The flood didn't break them. It strengthened their bonds and their determination to create a better future.
It's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable hardship, the human spirit endures.
Absolutely.
And that's a pretty powerful message to take away from this deep dive.
It is.
So to our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring the source material you provided and to keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
Yeah, keep asking those questions.
What other seemingly minor events in history might hold hidden depths?
That's a fascinating thought.
What stories are waiting to be unearthed, and what lessons can they teach us?
The past is full of wisdom waiting to be discovered if we're willing to look for it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deeper.